Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Rig Crafting. I'm the Rig Crafting Dad, and in this episode, we're going to upgrade our John's boat here from its air cooler that you saw in the previous video to this Arctic Liquid Freezer 2. This is the 240 millimeter version. There is a larger version, but we're going to do the 240 millimeter version. So I'm going to do a quick unboxing, and then we'll go right to installation. So we've got our unit unboxed and we've got all the parts here. We only need the parts for our specific model, which is the Intel 1150 socket. So all of the parts we can set aside. Be sure to check the instructions. Taking a look at the Arctic website, because there are no actual paper instructions in the box. You have to use the QR code. There is a pretty well documented set of instructions on how to install this. There is a video, skip the video, just go to the instructions where it tells you how to actually mount these things. And it does a pretty good job of telling you to make sure that your pump is higher than your actual radiator. So that's very important. The other thing is when you're mounting it, and I'll show you, I'm going to mount mine on the top of the case here. And I'm actually going to put the side where the tubes are not connected. I'm going to make that a little bit higher than where the tubes are. So there are some included spacers. So I'm going to make the space on the tube side just a little bit lower. That way any air bubbles will travel to the top. So if you're mounting it on the top or the front of your case, I would mount it with the top of the radiator, the side that does not have the tubes, upright if possible. Alright, so I've got all the parts spread out here and I've got our case prepared. We've removed our old air cooler and I've got the top part of this John's boat off so that we can install our radiator. I've got the pieces here that we're going to need for the pump itself. So you're going to install the bracket for the pump, then you're going to install the back plate, and then finally mount the pump to the CPU and secure it. One thing you do want to do before you try installing the pump and the radiator is determine what direction you want the air to flow. So the instructions online give you some guidance as to what options you have, but you have the fans on default. They're on the bottom of the radiator blowing air through. So if we're mounting it to the top here, that means the hot air is going to come through the top. You could also put the fans on top. There's lots of different options, but you're going to want to change your fans to exhaust air or pull air in, depending on the other case fans you have. We only have one 80 millimeter fan in the back exhausting air. We don't have any air on fans on the front pulling air in. So we'll have to probably add a fan on the front just so we have some air coming in. But in our case, we may want to pull the air through the top instead of exhaust it. So I'll want to reverse the fans before we get started. All right, so I've got the fans reversed, so it's going to pull air in through the top of the case and exhaust into the case. So that way our small 80 millimeter fan can exhaust out the back. So we'll pull air in through the front, the top, and exhaust out the back. So now that we've got all of our setup correct, we're going to start mounting the radiator and mounting the pump. As per the instructions, I've mounted these two brackets on either side of the pump, and now we can focus on the back plate here. If you saw my previous video where I talked about the back plate on this old Dell motherboard, it came with this back plate that had both the CPU socket bracket attached to it and the CPU cooler attached to it. So I 3D printed this bracket so that it held the CPU socket bracket in place and I could mount the appropriate CPU cooler. So if you want more information on that, then see my previous video on the mounting the AK500 DeepCool CPU cooler. Okay, so we've got our back plate here, and it comes with these 4 silver hexagonal female kind of nuts, if you will, and those get mounted to the back plate. And there's 2 sets of hexagonal kind of squares. So depending on your socket type, you'll just want to consult your manual for which hole you will attach these to. And then you'll put these rubber grommets kind of around the top on all 4 corners. And you're ready to mount the back plate. All right, so we've got our back plate on. I've got 2 of the standoffs already installed, so it holds the back plate in place. And then I'm going to install the other 2, and we'll be ready to install the pump. We have our thermal paste applied, and this time I decided to do the 5-point configuration. In my previous video where we installed the DeepCool AK500, I just used the P in the center. So if you want to check out that video, you can. And now we're ready to install the pump, and it's just going to attach to these 4 poles here, and then we'll tighten it down. All right, so we're just about ready to install the radiator and the pump into our case. But first, before we get to the pump installation, which per the instructions is the next step, we want to make sure that our radiator has enough clearance. So let's make sure that we do that before we try and install our pump and our radiator and screw it down. All right, so we're going to dry fit the radiator just to make sure that it fits, and we can finagle it in there with the power supply and the cables and the fans. And it looks like it's going to fit. The last thing we need to do before we install the pump onto the CPU is make sure that we remove the plastic protective label from the copper plate. That way we can actually have thermal performance, and this is a very common mistake people tend to make, so make sure that you remove the plastic coating first. All right, I've pre-attached the cable here that's going to power our pump, and now we're going to install the pump itself. So we finished the installation of our water cooler. Now we're going to check the thermals and see what the performance is. So checking the thermal performance of this water cooler turned out pretty well. So compared to our original water cooler, which was peaking at 173 degrees, our water cooler here is taking that down 40 degrees to 134 degrees. So that's pretty big drop. It's also very quiet. So that comparing that to our DeepCool AK500, which we saw at 144 degrees, we see a 10-degree difference between this water cooler and the DeepCool air cooler. So I expected a little bit more of a gap between the air cooler and the water cooler, but this also runs a lot more silent. So you get thermal performance and it runs quiet when compared to either air cooler, but it also costs almost double what the air cooler does. So you're gonna have to weigh your costs to your thermal performance and the ambient noise that it would create. So take those into consideration when you're looking to purchase one of these. I hope you like this project. I hope you learned something. This is the last step in this project, so we're going to be wrapping up this particular series. So if you have any questions, leave me a comment in the comment section. Also, if you like this video, click the like, and always you can subscribe if you found this to be helpful. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you on the next project.